Something up. Why was it a terrible mistake? Because you look something up, you find so many different opinions about what the Rebbe did, you're dizzy. I looked up to see, because there was one thing I wasn't sure about that I wanted to tell you today, and I wanted to tell it to you correctly, so I looked, and I found a bunch of versions, not just of that, but many other things. So I'm going to tell you what I remember. I just want you to know that when someone wrote a diary, then, at the time that the events happened, and I come along and I give you a different version, probably what is written in the diary is correct. And what I'm saying is incorrect. Not because he's smarter than me, because he wrote a B'Shas Maaseh. You know, memory is a funny thing. Especially since I wasn't by one Tkiyas of the Rebbe, I was by so many. My earliest memories of Tkiyas, I was 7 or 8. 7 or 8. My last memory of Tkiyas, I was 26 years old. It's about 20 years. And I wasn't always there, but I probably was by the Rebbe 15 years for Tkiyas. For sure, 15, maybe almost, if not 15, 14. I'm so blessed, I'm so lucky. My father had such good seats. We were able to see almost everything. And gosh, could we have behaved better? That's all I have to say, we could have behaved better. I told you last time about how Rabbi Katz would announce, where you're standing and in front of whom you're standing. That plays in my head not once a year, but like 5 times a day. The Rebbe Bechlal knows everything. What happens in his Dalet Amos, he for sure knows. And there were a lot of things that happened in the Rebbe's Dalet Amos that the Rebbe was not particularly happy about. He accepted it. To some extent, the Rebbe accepted the pushing. But when it turned from pushing into fighting, the Rebbe, once the Rebbe came in like 11:45, and Yom Kippur morning, came in almost an hour late, because when he came to shul in the morning, they told me that the women had a fight, and one woman put another lady in the hospital. And the Rebbe said that woman has to go to the hospital and apologize, and he's not coming down till she returns and came and reports back that she apologized and that the lady accepted her apology. The Rebbe came in almost an hour late because the Rebbe heard about a fight. Now, the Rebbe knew about the fights whether he heard about them or not, but when you told him, it was different, you know. But we could have behaved. We could have remembered. Anyway, let's talk about Tkiyas. The last thing I told you, I listened this morning, was about the Sefer Torah. That people paid tens of thousands of dollars to have the right to do Hagbah. And a whole year they didn't bother. If you paid for it, somebody else can do Hagbah Galila. But if you did Hagbah Galila, you got to stand mamish next to the Rebbe, B'Shas the Tkiyas. The big Sefer Torah, which was called Mashiach Sefer Torah, was to the Rebbe's right, on the Kingston side. And the small Sefer Torah, which was on the Rebbe's left, on the Eastern Parkway side, was on the Rebbe's left. So the Rebbe would say the Maftir, and the Haftarah, and after the Haftarah, the Rebbe would turn around and the 2 Sfarim would come forward. Now, did I tell you about the being a Makri or not? Did I tell you that thing or not? About somebody reading the Tkiyah out loud with the Rebbe or not? That's a negative, right? There's a halach in Shulchan Aruch that when a person blows shofar, it's like when a kohen duchens. When a kohen duchens, the chazan is supposed to say the words before, right? Why is the chazan supposed to say the words before? So the kohen shouldn't make a mistake. In all of my years of experience, the kohen never makes a mistake, the chazan often makes a mistake. But the chazan is there to tell the kohen what to say, the kohen shouldn't say the wrong word. The same halacha applies by tkiyas. When you blow shofar, somebody else is supposed to stand next to the Baal Tekiah, and he says loud, Tekiah, Shvarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah, and then the Baal Tekiah blows. In Chabad, the minig is not to say it out loud, but you point with your finger. So there's a difference when you're the makri by a regular minyan, and you're the makri if the Rebbe is the one blowing the Tekiyas. If you're the makri and a regular guy is blowing, in other words, someone in shul is blowing, and you're standing next to him, so you point at the Tekiyah, he blows the Tekiyah. When you take your finger off the Tekiyah, he stops. When you put your finger on the Shvarim, he blows the Shvarim. You take your finger off the Shvarim, he stops. But when the Rebbe blows shofar, you don't want to tell the Rebbe how long the sound should be. So when the Rebbe blows Tekiyah, the makri has his finger on the Shvarim, the next one. When the Rebbe blows Shvarim, he has his finger on the Teruah. When the Rebbe blows the second Tekiyah, the second Teruah, he blows on the you're one ahead of the Rebbe. Now there is an uncertainty about whether the Rebbe Bechlal had a makri. It's conceivable that the Rebbe did both things himself. It's also possible, and I was never able to ascertain this with a certitude, that Rab Shmuel Levittin, who was a very great chassid, a very special chassid, who the Rebbe had a very unusual relationship with, called Rab Shmuel Levittin. And some people say he was a Levi, he always got Levi. Some people say that he was the Makri. Some people say that he wasn't. The bottom line is that Shmuel passed away in 1974, Tafshin Lamed Dalet. So for sure, Lamed Hey, Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, 74 to 75, 75 to 76, and 76 to 77, the Rebbe did not have a Makkah. He did both. The year of the heart attack, Tafshin Lamed Ches, the morning of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe sent a message to Rabbi Tenenbaum, Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum, who, as I told you before, was about the case. He blew the Tkiyas of Musaf, and after davening, and the Rebbe told him, I want you to stand next to me, and I want you to be the Makri. So from Tafshin Lamed Ches, the Rebbe would stand on the left, Rabbi Tenenbaum would stand on the right, and he would point. So during the preparatory stuff before the Rebbe blew the Tkiyas, Rabbi Tenenbaum was standing behind. Right behind the Rebbe, there was to be on that bimah was by invitation only. The Rebbe's bimah by Tkiyas was all the way invitation. And the Rebbe wanted Rosh Hashanah Yidden who came from hard places. The Rebbe wanted people with tzaddas to be on the bimah with him. Right behind the Rebbe was his secretaries. Behind that was whoever was invited. One of the groups of people who had the schus to be at the bimah with the Rebbe was all the Gabayim. 770 had many Gabayim. If you were a Gabay, you were entitled to be on the bimah during Tkiyas. Rabbi Tenenbaum was there. He stood behind the secretaries, behind Rabbi Groner, behind Rabbi Klein. I don't remember Rabbi Chadakov, but I'm assuming Rabbi Chadakov was there also. And when the Rebbe was about to blow, then would turn around and he would come forward. I think before the Rebbe made the bracha, he would point with his finger. Now, in Tafshin Nun Beis, the year the year of the stroke, that's what it is. I don't like to call it that, but that's what it is. There were a lot of shinuyim by the Rebbe. A lot of things the Rebbe did were different. And one of the things the Rebbe did was different was as follows. Remember, the Rebbe is standing, here's the big Sefer Torah, here's the little Sefer Torah. The Rebbe stands here, Rabbi Tenenbaum stands here. So the Rebbe is to the left, Rabbi Tenenbaum is to the right. So normally when the Rebbe would turn around, he would turn this way and motion Rabbi Tenenbaum to come forward. In 1992, the Rebbe turned this way, to his left. And Rabbi Tenenbaum, I could see in my mind's eye, I remember this, understood that he belongs here and not here, but the Rebbe is inviting him to come here. So he started to bob, he started to dodge the Rebbe. He wanted to let the Rebbe know that the Rebbe made a mistake. The Rebbe turned the wrong way, but the Rebbe didn't make a mistake. So he went like this once or twice, and the Rebbe didn't turn around the other way. So Nun Beis, both days, the Rebbe stood, it was a very visible Shina, the Rebbe stood on the right, and Rebbe Tenenbaum stood on the left. And that Tishrei, there were many, many things that the Rebbe changed. And these are in Yonim that only a Rebbe understands. So he was the Makri. He would point with the finger when the Rebbe blew the Tkiyas. So the Rebbe finished the maftir. He would indicate this for the Sefer Torah to come forward. And the Rebbe had on the bimah peklach. I told you the paper, I described this to you in the last class, these brown paper bags, these brown pieces of paper folded up and tied with a rope, the string in both directions. Now, in the years that I remember, there was always 3. I looked up this morning, in the first years there was 2. And I read one year there was 4. So obviously 3 was not mamish b'diyuk. But what the Rebbe would do is, the 3 that I remember, he would make into an upside down segel, 2 underneath and 1 on top, at the top of the bimah. And then the Rebbe would throw his talis over his head, and you would see the Rebbe swaying back and forth. I looked up this morning in the Rishim, it says the Rebbe was swaying vigorously. The Rebbe was not swaying vigorously. He was swaying like this. This is vigorous. The Rebbe didn't move a lot, so this was considered a lot. The Rebbe was swaying back and forth. So the whole talis, like a tent. He doesn't have it on shoulder. The whole talis like a tent over the whole bimah, and the Rebbe is swaying back and forth. This is called hachana l'tkiyas, the preparation for the tkiyas shofar. And apparently all the Rabbeim did it. When the Rebbe does hachana l'tkiyas, we do nothing. There's nothing to do. People learn say mitilim if you want, but we just wait. In the earlier years, when the crowd was smaller, hachana l'tkiyas was very long, could be even half an hour. People used to faint. It was gefährlich. People used to faint. In the years that I remember, which means basically after my bar mitzvah, I don't think it was ever more than 10 minutes, maximum 15. Did ever cut it shorter? And people will tell you as if people understand, but the Rebbe was very sensitive to the fact that there were so many people, there was so much pushing, and people were fainting, and the Rebbe curtailed, the Rebbe cut himself back because the Rebbe was sensitive to the crowd. It's a fact that all the Rabbeim were sensitive to the fact that there were people around them, even though the Rebbe was doing the holiest of things, and the people around him were one step lower than the holiest of things. The Rebbe was very, very sensitive to the crowd. I mean, one of the best examples for this is the Rebbe never, ever finished Yom Kippur 1 minute late. Never. We finished on time. The Rebbe didn't, and he said, why? I don't want people to fast extra. I don't want to have it on his children. People should fast extra. So the later years in Minor Yoren, the Hachana L'Tkiyas was shorter. What did the Rebbe do during Hachana L'Tkiyas? So there were a number of things that we know. Number one, The Rebbe sang a nigun. He hummed a nigun. But mamish, only the people closest to the Rebbe could hear the nigun. Rabbi Groner, who stood right behind the Rebbe, he would claim that he hears the nigun. And from what I understand, I don't know this for a fact, I don't know anything for a fact, but from what I understand, Rabbi Groner said that Rebbe would sing either the nigun, the Shalosh Tnuas, from the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and Alter Rebbe, or there's a Chabad, there's a nigun from Alter Rebbe, which the Alter Rebbe davened with at Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It's called a Chabad Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim. It's a bitter nigun azad that the Alter Rebbe would hum Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and sometimes the Rebbe would sing that Tnuah, the Chabad Tnuah, under the talis. Another thing the Rebbe did under the talis was that the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe said Yizkir. Now I don't know you Kindalach. If there is in this room a Yesema, God forbid, a girl doesn't have a father or a mother, the Minik Chabad is the second day of Rosh Hashanah before Tkiyas, we say Yizkir. Okay, this is what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe publicized it. So this becomes a Chabad custom. The Rebbe would say Yizkir under the talis the second day, which means for all of us who have parents, Arichas Yom B'Shanim Tevis, we say Avarachamim. Whenever the Olam says Yizkir, the people, we always go at a shul, people say Yizkir, but the people don't say Yizkir, we say Avarachim. Avarachim is that paragraph which we say every Shabbos before Ashrei. You don't say it when you don't say Tachnun. On days that people say Yizkir, they kick all of us, as the expression is, Ala Kid Reis, all the kids should go out. As long as you have parents, you're a kid. So you should say Avarachamim. The second day Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe said Yizkir under the talis.
So both the times? Like, who say Yizkir?
So apparently you don't know. So Mitzvah Shem, it should take you a very, very long time to find out. You say it for your father or for your mother, basically. And people already say Yizkir can say for a brother, for a sister. And after the Holocaust, people had Megillas for Yizkir. I was never in shul for Yizkir. Baruch Hashem, I still, Baruch Hashem, have Gesundheit to have parents, father and mother. I have a white beard, but I'm a kind. I go out for Yizkir. Okay. And the Rebbe also did holy stuff. I, as a child, remember standing with my father in shul, I must have been 8, hearing the Rebbe crying out loud, the Rebbe crying out loud for a long time. It may have been the year of the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War started Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah was 10 days before. But I was a little kid and I knew that boys don't cry. The whole class picks on you, you're not allowed to cry. And here the Rebbe was crying in front of everybody. He wasn't even ashamed. I remember feeling embarrassed for the Rebbe. How come the Rebbe is not ashamed that he's crying? That's how much seichel I had. But I heard the Rebbe cry often called, but not every year. However, I heard from somebody who was on the bimah that the Rebbe always cried before Tkiyas. It wasn't long enough, it wasn't loud enough. I didn't hear it, and I was probably 20 feet from the bimah and higher than the bimah. I was in front of the bimah. My father got us such good places. We could never possibly. We were so fortunate. I saw Tkiyas so many times. I was zocheh to see Tkiyas so many times. But only as a child I heard the Rebbe cry. Apparently the Rebbe always cried, but it was a little bit quieter. Another thing that happened under the talis was this. There is a process which is called Mesada Zayin de Shefris, arranging the Shefris. This is a mystical thing which Rabbeim do. We don't do these things. We just come to show one Shefer and you blow. The Rebbe had a whole series on Seder how he was Mesada de Shefris. So of course the story was that in Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1950 to 51, the Rebbe was not yet officially Rebbe, so the Baal Tekei was Beryl Rivka. The one who blew Shefer was the same person who blew Shefer, the Frierdiker Rebbe. There was nothing to talk about. But the following year, the Rebbe was already the Rebbe, not officially. So the Rebbe asked who's going to blow Shefer. So the Chassidim said the Rebbe's going to blow Shefer. The Rebbe said, but I don't know how to blow Shefer. And the Rebbe said, well, all the Rebbe blow Shefer. So the Rebbe said, okay, I'll be Masada the Sheferis, I'll arrange the Sheferis, and somebody else will blow. And the Rebbe sent a message, or he called Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum, Olav Sholem, and he asked him to be his Baal Tekei, that he should blow Shefer for the Rebbe, which he did. Rabbi Tenenbaum, the Rebbe had a stroke Chav Zayin Adar. Rabbi Tenenbaum had a stroke Chav Zayin Elul, the same year. In other words, he was the Rebbe's Baal Tekei. As soon as the Rebbe was finished, he died. It's really eerie. They were making plans that he should blow Shefer Nun Gimel 3 days before Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Tenenbaum had a stroke. He was the Rebbe's Baal Tekei. He blew Musaf, he blew after davening, and he stood next to the Rebbe by Tkiyas, as I'm going to describe to you momentarily. So when the Rebbe agreed to blow Shofar, the Rebbe said, okay, bring me Sefer HaSichos Tafshinei, the Frierdiker Rebbe Sichos, where the Frierdiker Rebbe describes how the earlier Rebbeim were Mitzvah Shofars. As if the Rebbe didn't know, the Rebbe needed to look inside the book, he didn't know by heart, bring me the book, I have to look inside and see how you do it. This is all, the Rebbe knew exactly how to do these things, but that's what the Rebbe did. Now, the way it goes, I looked it up this morning and I found contradictions, so I don't know how to do it. I'm going to tell you what I understand and I'm going to tell you what I remember, but evidently, at least some years I don't remember correctly. The Rebbe always had 3 shayfres. And I don't know if I mentioned this previous class, as a child, the Rebbe used to use a very small black shayfer. He would hold it in his hand, it would come out of this side 2 inches. It was a very small black shayfer. The rumor was that it belonged to the Tzemach Tzedek. I'm assuming it was very hard to blow that shayfer. It was a very small hole. The tone was a very high pitch, very high pitch. After my bar mitzvah, the Rebbe was using big shayfers, beautiful, the kind of shayfers you could buy in the store. They were much easier to blow. And the story was 2 things. Number one, the shayfer that the Rebbe used to blow became puzzle. They fixed it and they made it kosher, but the Rebbe didn't want to use it anyway. And the Rebbe, Chaya Mushka, the Rebbe's wife, went to the store on Kingston Avenue, however she did it, and she said, give me the 3 easiest shayfers you got. The easiest ones that could blow. The Rebbe's not part of Rachmanus on the Rebbe. And she bought very easy shayfers, and she sent them to the mosquito, said, my husband's using these. And my husband used these. So when I was a bacher, as a child, I remember this little black one, but as a bacher, the Rebbe used a larger shayfer, and it was easier to blow. That's what the Rebbe used. The Rebbe always had 3 shayfers, and he always had 2 shmatas. And then I'll explain in a moment, he had a third. Shmata means a piece of cloth. Now, the story goes that one of the Rabbeim, maybe it was the Rebbe Rashab, and maybe it wasn't Tafresh Samar Gimel, one of the Rabbeim had a dream or some kind of a vision where someone came to him from the other world and told him, do not give the Satan notice that you're going to blow shayfer. The Satan doesn't need a heads up that you're going to blow shayfer. So from that time on, the Rabbeim used to be Masada the shayfers under the talis. In other words, they would throw his talis over his head, and he'd be swaying back and forth, swaying back and forth. At some point, while he was under that talis, the Rebbe would arrange the shayfers and nobody could see. The second day is called Dina Rafia. The first day is called Dina Kashya, hard judgment. The second day is called Dina Rafia, soft judgment. On the second day, it doesn't matter the Satan knows because not so afraid of the Satan. The second day, you would see the Rebbe being Masada the Shayfers. I saw it properly only once, because in order to see the Rebbe being Masada the Shayfers, you had to be on the Rebbe's right and higher than the Rebbe. I was on the Rebbe's right, but I was in front. I was 20 feet maybe eastward or 15 feet eastward. One year, my brother-in-law, Zogazunzan, got me a very good place. I was mamish. I was on a bench maybe 15 feet from the Rebbe, but directly to the Rebbe's right, and I was able to see exactly what the Rebbe was doing. I was only 16 years old, so exactly what did I understand? And frankly, when I'll be 60, I'll understand the same thing. But I saw the Rebbe being Masada the Shayfers, and I'm going to tell you what I remember. Like I said, I made the mistake of looking it up this morning, and I found very different versions, but I'm going to tell you how I remember it. But remember again, the first day, when the Rebbe picked up his head, the shayfers were already, the package was already there. The second day, the Rebbe would pick up his talis, and you could watch the Rebbe being inside of the shayfers. The Rebbe had a big white cloth. It was almost see-through, like a modern Orthodox collar veil. You know what I'm saying? You see through it. And it was probably 20 inches. It was pretty large. And the Rebbe would stretch it out and make it very flat, very flat. On top of that, he had what was called a red kerchief. The red kerchief that I remember was not red. It was black with red flowers. And the Rebbe would, and it was much smaller. Maybe it was 12 inches by 12 inches. It was considerably smaller than the white one. And he would also stretch it very flat. Then the Rebbe would put down the 3 shayfers, and there was a way how he put the 3 shayfers down. The narrow end was at the bottom, the wide end was at the top, but people knew he pointed this way, pointed this way. I did not pay attention to that. Now, remember, the second day, Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, you have a problem with a shechayanu. For the same reason that the second night of Rosh Hashanah, you make a shechayanu on a Pri Chodesh because it's Yom Arichtet, you can't make 2 shechayanus. And by the way, I'm mentioning this to you because it's good to know. When you bench lich the second night of Rosh Hashanah, the shechayanu fruit has to be on the table. Because your shechayanu, when you're benching licht, is as much a shaila as your father or your brothers or your husband's shechayanu when they're making kiddush. Because the second day of Rosh Hashanah is considered one long day. So just like you have to have a Pri Chodesh before Kiddush, when you say the Shechayanu, you say the Shechayanu on the Pri Chodesh, when you're benching Licht, you should make sure that the new fruit is on the table before you bench Licht, and the Shechayanu you're having Kavanah also on the Pri Chodesh. And the same is to Tkiyas. If you blow Sheva both days, the second day's Shefer, the Shechayanu, the second day, is a Shaila of a Nasser Shechayanu. So the Rebbe always had a new beged. The new beged was always a beautiful white, I was a maven in beauty, like I don't know what, a beautiful white silk scarf, which was bought from one of the most expensive stores in Manhattan. The Rebbe used to go to Saks Fifth Avenue and buy the Rebbe a white silk scarf, which he wore once. And that white silk scarf was also in that package. So after the Rebbe laid down the white shefer, the tichel, and the so-called red tichel, which was black with red feathers, he put down the 3 sheferis. That's how I remember it. And on top of that, he put the white kerchief. It was folded. Then he would close the red one, close the white one, like make it to a little package, turn the whole thing upside down, and press down. He appeared like a little pekala package. Now, this is my recollections. And again, I don't say that what I recollect is true. This is how I remember it. What I find absolutely incredible is that black kerchief, the black kerchief with the red feathers and flowers. I heard that it belonged to the Rebbe Marash. This morning I looked in the Yuman and said it belonged to the Alter Rebbe. So it was old. The first time I saw it, it was whole. It had a shape. The last time I saw it, I'll never forget it. You know what slinky is? You know what slinky is? Yeah. A Peias, yeah? That's what it looked like. The shape had completely come apart. The kerchief it didn't hold its shape anymore. It was so old, it was so worn out, that you have an old piece of fabric, but it's a piece of fabric. This piece was so nebach, so pathetically old, that it just, I could see in my mind's eye. They picked it up, looked at it. I'm not going to say the Rebbe smiled, but it was sort of like a sense of humor kind of moment. Just plop, he just dropped it. There was nothing, there was no way he was going to stretch it out. So in the Yuman that I looked up this morning, he said the Rebbe had a second red one. I don't remember that, but this is for sure. At the Rebbe, there was Nun Beis. The Rebbe picked it up, maybe it was an Alphas, looked at it, and in an ironic way just dropped it. It was just nothing. There was just it had no body. There was no way it could be stretched out. Then the Rebbe would fold the package and turn over. Now, I want to say one other thing now, which is negaya more to later, but I guess I might as well say it now. You must understand that I'm not telling you what happened. I am telling you what I observed. That's all it is. This is my experience. So I want to share with you how I remember it. Number one, during the Tkiyas, the Rebbe's face was visible. Again, I looked up a Yaman this morning, which the Rebbe's face was covered with a talis. That's not how I remember it. I looked up Yamanim from different years. When I remember the Rebbe Tkiyas, the Rebbe's face was, you can see the Rebbe whole face. The Rebbe looked totally composed. Totally composed. The feeling that I had looking at the Rebbe was, like someone says, I got this, I got this, it's under control. The feeling that you had, that I had, was that Rebbe was completely in charge. Whatever he was doing, he got it. He was complete. That was the feeling that I had. Very, very composed, very collected. Not nervous, not uptight, collected, composed. His face, and again, this is just my experience, was pale. It wasn't fiery red, although I see many people writing that it was. His face was pale, with a little bit of color. And the countenance of the Rebbe, that combination, made you feel like the Rebbe was a million miles away. He was physically with you in the room, but he was in another universe. And that Pnei HaKodesh, that countenance, that look that you saw by Tkiyas, was the same face you saw by Napoleon's March, when the talus would slide up over the Rebbe's face, and you could see the Rebbe by Napoleon's March. Also, this very pale with a little color, and he just seemed, I'm using the word angel because I don't know what else to word to use. He looked very far away. To contrast that to Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, the Rebbe looked beautiful. He looked radiant. His face shone like the moon on a bright, clear night. Lichtig, beautiful and radiant and very close to you. Simchas Torah, you felt like the Rebbe was close to you, even if there were thousands of people in the room. Tkiyas, when you stood near the Rebbe, his face was in another place. And his actions in the Tkiyas were very collected, very calm. But you saw nerves. There were 2 places that you saw nerves. And that's why I'm telling this to you now. The first was how the Rebbe fixed his talis. 4 times by Tkiyas, the Rebbe threw his talis over his head. Number 1 was called Hachana L'Tkiyas, which when the Rebbe did that, we just stood and waited. Then the Rebbe picked up his talis, and if it was the second day, he would be Mesadeh the Sheferis, like I just described. Every time the Rebbe fixed his talis, the physical gestures with his hands, and even the grimaces, his face, It was like as if he was fighting with the talus. And there was a agitation almost about how the Rebbe was fixing his talus and fixing his talus and fixing his talus. He did it 4 times. Once after Achon Latkiyas, once after Lam Nateach, once after the first 12 Kailis, when it says in the Siddur, V'yisvad belacha, you should confess silently, and once after the second 9 Tkiyas, when it says again. And each time that was fixing, and the gestures, the motions of his hand, and the grimaces on his face showed a lot of impatience. The talus was part of what was going on, but it was holding him back, kind of thing. And I remember one year, by the time the Rebbe was done, his talus had turned 90 degrees. There was such a fight with his talus. One year, when the Rebbe was finished, the sides of the talus, you have black lines, right? And then there's like knots. One year, the black lines were across the Rebbe's forehead, and the knots were hanging down. Because the Rebbe was so busy. And the talus was something that he had to just do. And you saw in the fixing the talus that whatever the Rebbe was busy with was terribly important. But his face, his countenance, was incredibly collected. This is one place where you saw the nervousness of Tkiyas. And the other was the shofar. That was fighting with the shofar. The sounds wouldn't come out. And every year was different. In the later years, by the time the middle mems came, by the time I was a boy of, let's say, 16, 17, or 18, it went like a whistle every year. It was so easy. Even in Beis, in Memches, in Beis, it just went very easy. It just went, no problem. But as a child, I remember, and maybe even after my bar mitzvah, that means after Lamed Ches, that sometimes the Rebbe had a hard time blowing shofar. The Rebbe knew how to blow. The Rebbe used to blow shofar for himself every day in Elul. People would stand by the window and listening to the Rebbe blow shofar in his room. The Rebbe had no problems blowing shofar. The Rebbe was having a difficulty blowing shofar. It was obviously an inyan pnimi. It was something deeper that was going on, and the Rebbe was struggling. But what you saw the Rebbe do is the Rebbe had 3 shofar. He's holding 1 shofar. He takes his talus and he wipes out the mouthpiece to get the spittle out, the whatever moisture is in. And he tries it once and he tries it twice. I don't remember this, but people describe they were putting down 1 shofar, picking up another one, trying the other one, back and forth. And there was a sense of, I guess you could say, frustration in the Rebbe trying to get the sounds out of the shofar. There was one year, way back when, before I was born, in Tafshin Yutes, from what I remember, 1958, where the Rebbe couldn't finish the Tkiyas Kayachol, the sounds wouldn't come out. So he handed the shofar to Mendel Tenenbaum, Rabbi Tenenbaum, Olav Shalom, and he finished. In Tafshin Lamed Vav, 1975, I was present. I was 10 years old. I was there, but I don't remember. I'd be alive if I told you I did. It took the Rebbe half an hour, to get out the Tkiyah Gedolah. But he didn't give away the shofar. He fought and he fought and he fought and he fought half an hour to get out 1 sound. What things the Rebbe was pushing through is hard to know, but this is the sipur that it took the Rebbe very, very long to get out 1 sound. And when you watch the Rebbe cleaning the tip of the shofar, the Rebbe never did this, he didn't bang the shofar in his hand, but you would watch him wipe the mouthpiece with his talus. You could see that he was trying to get it done and it wasn't happening. Now you must remember this. The Rebbe didn't have a tooth in his mouth. I remember the Rebbe's last tooth. I was before Bar Mitzvah when he lost that tooth. Before Bar Mitzvah. The Rebbe shot katzener. First, when people without teeth, their face looks disfigured unless you put in dentures. The Rebbe didn't put in dentures. The Rebbe didn't put in dentures. The Frierdiker Rebbe made conditions with his son-in-laws. If you want to marry my daughters, you have to do a few things. One of them is you have to know 500 Amarei Chasidus by heart. And the other one is that you have to use dentures. The Rebbe didn't use any implants in his mouth. Kashrus, the Rebbe, I'm very frum like kashrus. The Rebbe didn't have a tooth in his mouth. He talked normal, had a slight lisp, which is pashut supernatural. It was one of those things that you saw all the time, you didn't realize it. The Rebbe's face should have looked shrunken. He should have looked sunken in, like a newborn baby. Okay. The Rebbe's face looked normal. The Rebbe kept his jaw ajar all the time, deliberately, because he had no teeth. Your teeth keep your jaws from getting too close. The Rebbe didn't have teeth. The Rebbe spoke normally, and the Rebbe, it's impossible. If you have no teeth, you can't pucker your lips from blow. And the Rebbe blew shofar unzained. And the other thing is, I recall distinctly the Rebbe biting down on the shofar. Now, how do you blow a trumpet? Anybody play a flute or a trumpet or you put it on your lip, right? And the whole trick is you have the muscles on your lips. A guy once explained to me that the muscles on the lips, you have to keep them strong, you have to exercise them, and if the muscles go wrong, you can't play your instrument. You put it on your lip. The Rebbe was biting down. Okay. I remember them biting down on the shofar. The shofars that they now have, that the Rebbe used, have blood on them. Now, I don't know if this was always, but certainly on occasion, the Rebbe put the shofar in his mouth and blew, which is not possible. Forget the teeth. He didn't put it on his lips, he put it in his mouth. I could see in my mind's eye, I remember it. The Rebbe biting down on the shofar, like this. And he was going to blow with the shofar in his mouth. I don't know how you do that. So there were things about the Rebbe's Hanhoga that were normal, everyday things. They were really so extraordinary. They were so extraordinary, but we took it for granted. Yeah. But no human being, physical things that the Rebbe did, especially in the later years of the Rebbe's life when the Rebbe's body was elderly, that are not physically possible. That was such a balabais over his goof, it was extraordinary. But the Rebbe managed to blow a shofar without teeth, and again, at least one occasion, possibly more, the Rebbe didn't put the shofar on his lips. He put the shofar in his mouth, which I don't know how you blow like that. Okay? So that's a little bit about the Arum B'Mizakt. But the place, these are the two places where you saw the Rebbe's intensity was in how he was fixing the talis over and over again, and how he was fighting with the shofar to get the shofar to let him to blow the tkiyas. So the Rebbe did what's called hachana l'tkiyas. He would throw his talis over his head, and you would see him swaying back and forth, not vigorously, in spite of what it says in the Yumanim that I saw this morning, like this. The whole, like it was a mountain, it was moving back and forth. The first day when he picked it up, the shofar was ready. The second day, the Rebbe would straighten beside the shofars as I described before. Then the Rebbe would take the edges of his talis and put them behind his ears like this here, and hold it up like this. And then he would say, Lam natzeyach livnei koirach mizmer, or once in a while, Lam natzeyach livnei koirach mizmer, and throw the talis back. And now we were busy. The whole shul said, Kapitel Mem Zayin, it's not a very long kapitel, 7 times. The Rebbe always took longer. The Rebbe B'chlal davened very quick. You could have said Lam natzeyach 14 times. The Rebbe took his time. The Lam natzeyach took a long time. And then the talis came up again, and again, fixing the talis. And then the Rebbe said 8 psukim, right? There's 8 psukim. The first pasuk is Men HaMeitzar. The last pasuk is Allah Likim Bisru. And in between you have Kuf, Reish, Ayin, Shin, Tov, Nun, Tes, Nun. Kra, Sotan, right? Keli, Shema, Reish, Devarcha, Emes, Arev. Right? There's 8 psukim. And the Rebbe would sing each one of the psukim in a very normal voice, not a high voice. He wasn't in a very normal voice. And there was Shinuyim. There was a standard nusach how the Rebbe sang it, but every pasuk there was a little bit different. The Rebbe sang all 8 psukim. I'm not comfortable singing it here, and I'm certainly not comfortable singing each pasuk twice, because I can remember almost each pasuk how the Rebbe made shinuyim. I'm just going to share with you one experience, which I'll never forget. The year the Rebbetzin passed away, Tov Shin Mem Ches, there were a lot of shinuyim that year also. One of the psukim is Arev Avdechalatev Al Yashkuni Zeder, and the way the Rebbe used to sing it normally was Arev Avdechalatev, or sometimes Arev Avdechalatev, and then he would sing Al Yashkuni Zeder. That's how the Rebbe sang it. In Tov Shem Amchas, the Rebbe sang Al Yashkuni Zedim. But both days, but the first day, when the Rebbe said Al, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, Tov Shem Amchas, it came out in a cry. A cry! The whole thing was a half a second. But it was a cry of, when you read in holy books, Agishreif and Yechidish Nefesh, I heard how that sounds. The best chazan in the world, the most talented singer, cannot sing how that sounded. And it was so fast. And it just kept on going. The Rebbe didn't cry and say, okay, I got to get tissues. It just kept moving. The I was Agishrei. It was a cry. For Mamash from Mitzah Nefesh, these, by the Rebbe, things would happen like this from time to time, and you didn't know what to think. Okay, you can sit. Go ahead. It's fine. Huh? Of course. But these things, you couldn't control the Rebbe. You didn't want the Rebbe to do these kinds of things because you knew they have meaning, and the meaning was very painful. But the Rebbe did what he had to do. But it was so fast, you could forget it. That Al, I'll never forget the Al. And I've looked in many Rishimis, a lot of people didn't even hear it. Didn't even register. It was like Gishrei, Yechidish Benefesh, the first day. The second day he did it the same way, but second way he just sang it. There was no cry. And there was all these kinds of things. When the Rebbe said the Psukim, there were all kinds of these Shinuyim. Then there's a Nusach that you read a few lines, kind of a Yehiratzen, And then the Rebbe made the bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzveisav v'tzivanu lishmei kel shofar. And which came Amen. And the Rebbe said Shechiyanu both days. And then the Rebbe tore open the package, tore it open, pulled out the shofar, and he started to blow. So this morning I looked up the Yuman, and it says that in the first year, the Rebbe made the brachas. The Rebbe wanted Tenenbaum to make the brachas, and the Rebbe just made believe that he doesn't know what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe made the brachas, and the Rebbe handed the shofar to Tenenbaum to blow. The second year, the Rebbe made the brachas, that means Yud Gimel, and he blew the first sound. The third year, maybe the Rebbe blew Tashrat. It took a few years, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. My father's first recollection of Tkiyas was Yudalid, was the third year, and the Rebbe did not blow all the 30 kelim. He just blew a few of them. But within 5 or 6 years, the Rebbe blew all the Tkiyas Miyushav. But in the very beginning, again, what I saw this morning was that the first year the Rebbe didn't even blow one sound. I remember saying that the first year he blew one sound, but I'm going to trust what I saw in a book this morning that was written at the time, rather than what my memory is telling me. The second year, Yud Gimel, the Rebbe blew the first Tkiyah, and gave it to Tenenbaum. He blew the shofar. And the beginning with the third year, the Rebbe blew a little more till the Rebbe did all 30 kelas. Now, again, every year is different. The last year is Mamish, Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, the Tkiyas were easy and quick. The Truas were short, everything was very quick. But in the middle Mems, my Bacharim years, the Rebbe had a pretty easy time blowing shofar, the way I remember it. And the Tkiyas were very long. The minig is that the Tkiyah in the beginning is supposed to be as long as the Shvarim, the Trua, and the Tkiyah that comes after it. Or Fakert, the Tkiyah after, I forgot which. Either the Tkiyah before, the Tkiyah has to be as long as the Tkiyah, the Shvarim, Trua. So the Rebbe's case was very long. The Rebbe blew very long Truas, very long Truas. A lot of Truas. And I'm just going to share a couple of details, technical details. You know how the Rebbe blew a Shvarim, right? It was very unique. The Rebbe's Shvarim was tuhutu, tuhutu, tuhutu. And sometimes it was tuhutu, 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 tuhutu. There was a couple of extra sounds, which people are denying, but there's no doubt that the Rebbe did it. This is a halacha thing. When you blow shofar, there's a shaila if the Shvarim Trua should be one sound or two. So the pshara is that the Tkiyas Miyushav, the sounds that the Rebbe blew, the Shvarim go straight into two. It's one sound. Tu, during Shmoneh Esrei and during Chazar Sashatz and in Kaddish and then after Tilim, the Baal Tekeah blows tu when he stops and he breathes, and then he says tu. So when the Rebbe blew shofar, the Shvarim and the Trua went in one breath. He didn't stop. And the other thing is the Rebbe, most people blow Truas very quick. It's just easier. The Rebbe's Truas were quite slow. Two, and there could have been 100 of them. It went on and on. It wasn't 100, but it was so long. Each Trua, so you have the Shvarim, which is short, then the long Truas, and the Rebbe did this 3 times. And then when the Rebbe finished those, and like I told you before, after Lamed Ches, Rabbi Tenenbaum stood to the Rebbe's right, he pointed. As soon as the Rebbe finished the first 12, the Rebbe throws the towels over his head. And the same thing, you see the whole mountain swaying back and forth. This was rather quick. Then the towels came up, it was straighten the towels. And he blew 9 more. Tkiyah, Shvarim, Tkiyah. And then after that, he threw the towels back. It was the 4th time. And you would see the talus swaying back and forth. Also, the Misvah de Balachash was usually short. Picked up his talus, straightened it, and he blew the last 9. Tkiyah, Trua, Tkiyah. As soon as they finished one Tkiyas, there's again a Yehiratzen that you read a few lines. And then your Rebbe would say 3 psukim. There were 3 psukim afterwards. These 3 psukim, the Rebbe used to say in a crescendo, meaning each later pasuk was a higher tone. The first pasuk, the Rebbe would push it sing. He would sing it like a melody. Asherei ha'am yoidei seru ha'Hashem b'benecha yahalechun. The Rebbe Rashab used to sing all 3 psukim. The Rebbe didn't sing. The second pasuk and the third, the Rebbe would say it with a trup. B'shemcha was a higher tone. B'shemcha yegilon. And the third pasuk, the Rebbe would shout. Kisef eres. In other words, each one of these 3 last psukim was a crescendo, a higher tone. And as soon as the 3 psukim are finished, Ashrei Yeshu V'Yisecha, and everybody relaxes. And as soon as everybody relaxed, you would literally see Ve'ed Yalim and Haaretz. You see a vapor, a cloud of vapor slowly climbing up to the ceiling from the perspiration. And during Musaf, it was 770 was irrigated. The Rebbe would take the Shayferis in his right hand and take the 2 or 3 Siddurim, which I talked to you about yesterday, in his left hand. I talked to you about the Siddurim yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And he would follow the Sefer Torah. Normally, when the Rebbe went to an Aliyah, he came this way and he went back this way. But on Yom Tif, that there's no Yukum Purkan, so the Rebbe would follow the Sefer Torah. So the Rebbe would go this way and go back the same way. So the Sefer Torah went ahead of the Rebbe. And this was one of the big fights in 770. Chaver rushed to kiss the Sefer Torah and they get out of the way. The Rebbe's right behind. He's holding the Shayferis with the cloths in his right hand, the Siddurim in his left hand, and behind him is walking the Maskiris. Again, I don't remember Chadakov. I'm assuming he was there. And Label and Binyamin Aleim Hashem were holding the Peklach. By the way, I want to say one little detail. The Rebbe never took his talis off his head. The Rebbe never took his talis off his head. By the earlier Rabbeim, there was a tkufa in each tefillah. By Kaveh, the Rebbe Rashab took his talis off his head. The Rebbe never took his talis off his head, except Masiyim Kippur, which I'll tell you about next time. So the Rebbe has a scarf, right, which he used in the Tkiyas. So after the Tkiyas, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe didn't take his talis off. He kept his talis on. He would take the edge of the scarf, push it in here, and pull it out like this here. So without taking his talis off, and the whole Musaf, the Rebbe wore that scarf. It was a silk scarf. When the Rebbe walked out, you could see the Rebbe wearing the scarf, and then it went away for Kala Veils. That was the last time the Rebbe used it. Kalas got to use it after that. And the Rebbe would follow the Sefer Torah back to his place. He put the Shayferis in the Bima, and the Omid, and the Siddurim on top, the Peklach one on the table, and the Chazan is starting to pray for Musaf. While the Chazan, the Musaf, the Rebbe fixes his talis now proper. He straightens his whole talis. And when the Rebbe finished straightening his whole talis, the Rebbe would make a 360. You know what a 360 mean? A complete revolution, a complete all the way around. It says in Sfarim, I don't know which, but it says in Sfarim, that after Tkiyas, it's a minhag to look at the face of the Baal Tekiah. It's a school of I don't know what. So, when the Rebbe finished blowing shayfer, he went back to his place. The Rebbe would turn around 360 degrees, a complete circle. Okay, now, so Weinberg, Yosef Weinberg told me, he was on Friedrich Rebbe. The Friedrich Rebbe didn't have this many people. The Friedrich Rebbe, after he did Tkiyas, would physically turn his chair around, sit on his chair, facing the crowd, and look at everybody. But Ava the Chibbe Bashet. I mean, you didn't know Weinberg, right? He was such a beautiful man. With so much love, they would look at the Eilim, just look at everybody, look with a face full of love. The Rebbe did everything at supersonic speed. That was the Rebbe's operation. So the Rebbe would turn around, he's facing the wall. So he would hold up the edge of the talis and very slowly, slower than this, make a complete circle, 360. Somebody told me, and I don't remember this, but somebody told me that in Nun Beis, they made a complete circle this way, and then he circled around this way. He did it twice. I was there, and if it happened, I saw it, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't remember it. Somebody told me, and it's somebody that I actually believe that this actually occurred. And that was Tkiyas. That was Musaf. The Rebbe used to give Tanabam a shayfer. But Klal and Elul, the Rebbe used to give Tanabam a shayfer to practice, and the Rebbe gave him a shayfer, and Rebbe Tanabam blew Musaf. Rebbe Tanabam never had any, the Sultan never gotten Tanabam shayfer, Tanabam no problem blowing shayfer. And Musaf was Musaf, and the Shtulish Mesa, Heichus Mesa, the only feature that my Musaf, Rosh Hashanah, was Koyrim. And I'll tell you how it was. The Rebbe would fall to the ground. Koyrim, you bow down. Yom Kippur, you bow down 4 times. Rosh Hashanah, you bow down once. So what would happen is, the Bochum are climbing up, they just look at the Rebbe falling down, and the old people are screaming at the Bochum, chutzpah, the Rebbe is falling to the ground, and you're looking at him. So this was the war of the ages. The older people were saying it's not respectful, the Rebbe's doing Koyrim, you should look at him, and we wanted to see. It was nothing to see. The Rebbe used to fall to the knees and hit the floor. He did it in one motion. In other words, the Rebbe didn't use his hands. It would fall to the ground. Even when the Rebbe was older, he didn't get down using his hands. He would fall on his knees and fall forward in one motion. And when he got up, he would hold on to his chair. He would help himself get up. Nobody helped the Rebbe in public. But when the Rebbe did Koyrim, he would fall. He would just drop to his knees and fall forward in one motion. And then he would get up. This is by Aleinu. This was Koyrim. Now, of course, you probably know that when they duchend, the Rebbe went away from his place. The Koynim stood on the Rebbe's platform. And the Rebbe would go stand at the bottom of the platform. So Rosh Hashanah also, towards the end of Musaf, the Rebbe would go off his place, come down on the bottom, put another place for the Rebbe. The Koynim all went on the Rebbe's platform, and near the Rebbe's platform, and the Rebbe stood on the bottom. And after Musaf and after Kaddish, the Kohanim would come down, and the Rebbe used to say to every single Kohen, separately, Ayashakeach Kohen. And in other words, it took a while, because the Rebbe, each Kohen wanted, and the Rebbe said to every single Kohen who was on the bimah, as they would pass down, coming down the steps, each Kohen, Ayashakeach Kohen, then they went back to his place, and Tilim, and the other Musaf. The other thing that happened on Hashanah was Tashlich, right? And this is the different, Tashlich is Azoi. Tashlich is a long story. Tashlich is a long story. The Rebbe got here in Sivan Tafshin Aleph, right, in May of 1941. The Rebbe Rayatz had been in 770 by then for 10 months. He was been in 770 Rosh Hashanah before. So when it came to Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Beis, the following Rosh Hashanah, the Chassidim who had been there the year before knew already how Tashlich is, and the Rebbe Kvayachol didn't know how Tashlich was. So the famous story that Zalman Posner tells, you have to hear him tell the story, it's beautiful, that the Rebbe asked, is there a place to do Tashlich? Because very, very often, in a big city, there's no lakes. In a shtetl, shtetlach are all built on rivers and lakes. That's why they have them, because they need fresh water. If no water, you can't live. For transportation, for food, for irrigation, for drinking. But in a big city, we have pipes, plumbing, it's possible that there's no lake. So a lot of people live in places in New York City where you can't do Tashlich unless you want to walk 5 miles. So then you do it, you find a lake with fresh water, where there's fish, and you go say Tashlich. So the Rebbe asked, is there a place to do Tashlich? And they told the Rebbe, a mile from 770 is Botanical Gardens, it's still there. And the Botanical Gardens has an entrance on Eastern Parkway. It has an entrance and also an Empire on Eastern Parkway. And the Rebbe would go in and he'd go over to the lake and say Tashlich. The Botanical Garden was aware that the Fruma Yidden are coming the first day Rosh Hashanah to say Tashlich. So they wouldn't close at 5 o'clock. They stayed open till like 7, so that everybody could come and do Tashlich. And of course the story was that the Rebbe said that they should go in pairs. They should march like soldiers and sing a nigun. So the Rebbe was in the front row with Chadakov, and the Rebbe walked fast. And the whole Olam marched. It wasn't just a hodgepodge. They were marching like soldiers, singing. And the whole of Crown Heights was full of Jews. Most of them not from conservative, reform. They were very Jewish. They weren't very frum, but they were very Jewish. They were all in temple that day, so they all came out to watch the spectacle. It was an unbelievable experience. The Chassidim singing and thousands of people watching them. The first few years we looked like weirdos, but over time it became traditional. They waited for the Rebbe to go to Tashlich. And the Rebbe is going to Tashlich lasted 25 years, till the mid-60s. Way after he became a Rebbe, the Rebbe used to walk to Tashlich. The last time the Rebbe came to Tashlich, I'm assuming it was Chava, but I'm not sure. That means 65 to 66. The Rebbe comes to the lake. My father told this to me. There was a row of photographers. Click, 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 click. The Rebbe became too famous, you understand. So the Rebbe said, I'm not going to go next year to take pictures of the Rebbe on Yom Tif. I'm not going to go next year, even if it means that I can't do Tashlich on Rosh Hashanah. I'll go during Aseret Beit Shuvah. The Rebbe no longer went. And they found a spring under 770, and they dug it up, and we had Tashlich for 770.